Please subscribe, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Margaret. I've been raising my 7-year-old grandson Lucas for 3 years, ever since his mother, my daughter Rebecca, his father Kyle, remarried quickly. When Lucas's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, called me in to see his drawing, I thought it was about school behavior. What she showed me exposed a horror happening in my son-in-law's new home. The drawing was done in crayon, on white construction paper. Mrs. Patterson spread it across her desk with hands that trembled slightly. She'd called me at work, asked me to come to the school immediately, but wouldn't explain why over the phone. I'd driven there with my heart racing, imagining injuries or illness or behavioral problems. Instead, she showed me this. Lucas had drawn his house, the 2-story colonial Kyle had bought with Rebecca before she died. But in the drawing, the house had a basement with a small figure in the corner, a child-sized figure with chains on the wrists and ankles. Above ground, stick figures labeled Dad and Steph, Kyle's new wife. Stephanie stood in the kitchen, smiling, normal, while below them, in careful 7-year-old letters, Lucas had written, Lily in the bad room. Mrs. Patterson asked if I knew who Lily was. I did. Stephanie's daughter from her first marriage, 8 years old. She lived with Kyle and Stephanie full-time after her biological father signed away custody 2 years ago. I'd met her once, briefly, at Kyle and Stephanie's wedding 18 months ago. Quiet child, thin, avoided eye contact. I hadn't seen her since. Kyle had become distant after remarrying, limiting my visits with Lucas to supervised weekends at his house. I'd attributed it to normal adjustment, new family dynamics, Stephanie establishing herself, the natural complications of blended families. But this drawing suggested something else entirely. Mrs. Patterson said Lucas had been drawing variations of this picture for weeks, always the same elements: the house, the basement, Lily in chains or locked in a small space. When she'd asked him about it, he'd gone quiet, said he wasn't supposed to talk about Lily. Dad said Lily was being punished for being bad. My blood ran cold. I asked if she'd contacted Child Protective Services. She had. They visited the house yesterday, found nothing. Stephanie had shown them every room, including the finished basement. No locked spaces, no evidence of abuse. Lily had been at school, they were told, except Mrs. Patterson knew that wasn't true. Lily hadn't been to school in 3 weeks. Her teachers had been calling Kyle and Stephanie, who claimed she was sick with a persistent flu. A child has been missing school for 3 weeks. A drawing showing her locked in a basement. CPS found nothing during a house visit. Something was very, very wrong. Mrs. Patterson said she couldn't officially do more without evidence, but she was giving me the drawing. As Lucas's grandmother, as someone who'd raised him for years, maybe I could investigate in ways she couldn't. Maybe I could find what CPS had missed. I took the drawing with shaking hands, asked if I could take Lucas home early. She agreed. Lucas was quiet in the car. I waited until we were safely in my driveway before I asked about the picture, about Lily, about what happened at Dad's house. He started crying, said he wasn't supposed to tell, that Dad had said Grandma would get in trouble if Lucas talked about family business, that Lily was bad and needed discipline, and 7-year-olds didn't understand adult things. I held him, told him he wasn't in trouble. I needed to know the truth to help Lily. Slowly, with tears running down his face, he told me Lily lived in a hidden room behind the basement wall, a space Kyle had built when renovating, soundproofed, accessible through a false panel that looked like drywall. She was kept there whenever people visited, whenever CPS called, whenever anyone might discover her. She came out at night sometimes, to eat, to use the bathroom, but mostly she stayed in that room, being punished, Kyle said, for not adjusting to the new family, for being difficult, for crying about her old father, who'd abandoned her. My grandson had seen this, had been living in a house where his stepfather and stepmother kept a child imprisoned in a hidden room, had normalized it because the adults in his life told him it was discipline. I felt sick, furious, terrified. I called the police immediately. The police detective's name was Sarah Morrison. She came to my house within an hour, brought a specialist from the child exploitation unit. They interviewed Lucas gently but thoroughly. He repeated what he'd told me, described the false panel in the basement, the small room behind it, and Lily's crying that he could sometimes hear through the walls at night. Detective Morrison asked if Lucas could draw the basement layout, show them exactly where the hidden room was. He drew it carefully. the main basement area with its finished walls and carpet, the utility section with the water heater, and behind what looked like a solid wall near the Finessa, small square marked Lily's room. He drew the panel that opened it, showing where the latch was hidden. The detective photographed everything: Lucas's drawings, his statement, my statement. Mrs. Patterson had already submitted her concerns and the original drawing to the police. Detective Morrison said they'd need a warrant to search the house properly. The CPS visit yesterday had been voluntary. Kyle and Stephanie had consented to the home inspection, but could have hidden the room behind the false wall. A warrant would allow them to tear into walls, check for hidden spaces, and bring specialized equipment. She said it would take hours, maybe until tomorrow. I asked what happened to Lily in the meantime. What if Kyle and Stephanie realized people were asking questions? What if they moved her, hurt her? The detective made calls. Emergency warrant request based on a credible threat to a child's life. The judge would review it within 2 hours. In the meantime, they'd have patrol cars watching Kyle's house. If anyone tried to leave with luggage or a child, they'd intervene. I stayed with Lucas, made him dinner, but he didn't eat, put on a movie he didn't watch. He kept asking if Lily would be okay, if the police would save her, if Dad were angry at him for telling. I promised him he'd done the right thing, that telling the truth about someone being hurt was always right, even when adults said it wasn't, that he was brave, that I'd keep him safe. At 8:30 that evening, Detective Morrison called. They had the warrant. Officers were moving in now. I could hear sirens in the background of the call. She called again at 9:15. They'd found her, behind the false panel, exactly where Lucas had drawn it, a space roughly 4 feet by 6 feet, no windows, a bucket in the corner for waste, a thin mattress on the floor, and Lily, 8 years old, malnourished, filthy, cowering in the corner. When they broke through the wall, she weighed 43 pounds, should have weighed at least 60. Bruises covered her arms and legs, evidence of long-term confinement and physical abuse, indicators of sexual abuse that would require forensic examination. Kyle and Stephanie were arrested on the scene, charged immediately with child imprisonment, abuse, and torture. Additional charges are pending the medical examination results. Lily was taken to the hospital. Child Services placed her under emergency protective custody. I asked if I could see her. Detective Morrison said eventually, maybe. Right now, Lily needs medical care and trauma specialists. Lucas cried himself to sleep that night on my sofa, holding his stuffed bear, traumatized by living in a house where horror happened behind walls. The investigation expanded rapidly over the next week. Forensics found evidence of long-term imprisonment, Lily's DNA throughout that hidden room, scratches on the walls where she'd tried to claw her way out, a bucket used as a toilet for months. The smell was overwhelming even after removal. Chains embedded in the wall studs. Medical examination revealed the full extent of abuse, malnutrition, healed fractures that had never been properly treated, evidence of sexual assault over an extended period. The doctors estimated she'd been kept in that room for at least 18 months, possibly longer. Detectives interviewed neighbors. None had seen Lily in over a year. Kyle and Stephanie had told everyone she'd gone to live with relatives when she'd stopped attending school 3 weeks ago. They'd claimed persistent illness, but medical records showed no doctor visits. Police obtained a warrant for Kyle's computer and phones, found hundreds of photos of Lily in the room, documenting her deterioration, her weight loss, her bruises. Kyle had been photographing his abuse methodically, like a project. Worse, they found he'd been sharing these photos online, dark web forums dedicated to child abuse, trading images with other predators, discussing methods of control and punishment. The FBI got involved, traced his online activities, found he'd been active in these communities for 3 years, predating his marriage to Stephanie. He'd sought out a vulnerable single mother specifically to gain access to her child. Stephanie wasn't innocent. Messages between her and Kyle showed she'd known from the beginning, had participated in the abuse, had helped build the hidden room, had held Lily down while Kyle photographed her. They'd been partners in every aspect of this horror. But the investigation revealed something that made me physically ill. Rebecca, my daughter, Lucas's mother, she'd suspected something before she died. Police found her old laptop during the search of Kyle's house, her journal entries from 3 years ago. Shortly before her death, she'd written about concerns about Kyle's internet history, about finding disturbing images on his computer, about confronting him, and him convincing her she'd misunderstood, that they were from a true crime research rabbit hole. She'd been planning to check his devices more thoroughly, had written that she was thinking about taking Lucas and leaving, that something felt wrong about Kyle's obsession with Stephanie's daughter even before they were dating. Rebecca died in a car accident 2 weeks after that journal entry. Single vehicle crash. She'd lost control on a curve, hit a tree. Police had investigated, found no signs of foul play. But Kyle had been working on her car the day before. Routine maintenance, he'd said. The FBI requested that Rebecca's case be reopened, brought in accident reconstruction specialists. They exhumed her car from the salvage yard. Found evidence of brake line tampering, subtle, professional, designed to fail at high speed. Kyle had murdered my daughter to silence her suspicions and to gain custody of Lucas, possibly intending him as another victim. When that hadn't worked, I'd fought for custody and won partial guardianship. He'd married Stephanie to gain access to Lily instead. The trial took 11 months to reach. Kyle and Stephanie both pleaded not guilty initially. Their lawyers tried to claim Lily was being disciplined appropriately, that she'd been out of control, dangerous to herself and Lucas. The room was a therapeutic timeout. Space recommended by a specialist. No specialist existed. The hidden room had chains. The photos showed torture, not discipline. The medical evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors had everything: physical evidence, medical records, digital evidence, Lucas's testimony, Lily's testimony, though she was so traumatized she could barely speak, neighbor testimony, expert witnesses on child abuse. And they had something else. They had me. I'd kept every interaction with Kyle documented since Rebecca died. Every time, he'd limited my access to Lucas. Every excuse about why I couldn't see my grandson more. Every time Stephanie had been cold or evasive. Every instance that had seemed like a normal stepfamily adjustment, but now looked like a predator isolating his victims. I testified for 3 hours about Rebecca's suspicions before her death, about Kyle's sudden marriage to a woman with a vulnerable daughter, about Lucas's drawings and his terror when I'd asked about them, about the years I'd fought to maintain access to my grandson while Kyle tried to cut me out. The prosecutor asked why. I thought Kyle had limited my visits. I looked directly at Kyle in the courtroom, said that because I'd raised Rebecca to speak up about wrong things, because she'd learned to trust her instincts from me, because Kyle knew if Lucas spent too much time with me, he'd eventually tell me the truth. So Kyle controlled access, supervised visits, and made sure I never saw anything wrong. Kyle stared at me with flat eyes, no remorse, no emotion, just the cold calculation of a predator who'd been caught. Lily's biological father was found and interviewed. He'd signed away custody because Stephanie had told him Lily didn't want contact, that seeing him upset her, that he was making co-parenting impossible. He'd believed her, had walked away from his daughter, not knowing he was leaving her with monsters. He broke down on the witness stand, apologized to Lily, said he'd never have abandoned her if he'd known. Stephanie had manipulated him perfectly isolated Lily from her only other protector. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts, both of them. Kyle was sentenced to life without parole, plus 60 years on multiple counts of child abuse, torture, child pornography, production and distribution, and first-degree murder of Rebecca. The judge called him one of the most dangerous predators she'd encountered, said he'd hunted vulnerable families systematically, killed anyone who got close to discovering his crimes. Stephanie got 40 years to life. The judge noted she'd had opportunities to save Lily, to report Kyle, to stop the abuse. Instead, she'd participated, enabled, protected a predator, while torturing a child. Rebecca's case was officially changed from accidental death to homicide. Kyle was convicted of her murder based on the brake line evidence and motive established through her journal. Lily survived, but healing is long and painful. She was placed in specialized foster care with trauma-trained parents, underwent years of therapy, physical therapy for the damage from confinement, psychological therapy for everything she'd endured. I visited when she was ready, which took months. Her biological father fought to regain custody. After 2 years of supervised visits and family therapy, proving he was stable and capable, he was granted full custody. He moved to a different state, started fresh, where people didn't know their story. Last I heard, Lily was doing better, going to school, making friends, still in therapy, but functioning. Lucas lived with me full-time after the trial. We both went to therapy. He had nightmares for years about the house, about Lily's crying through the walls, about the adults he trusted being monsters. He's 12 now, doing well in school, still draws but now his pictures are of superheroes and dragons and normal kid things, not hidden rooms and chained children. I think about Rebecca constantly, about how she'd sensed danger, and Kyle had killed her for it, about how, if she'd lived, none of this would have happened. Lily would have been safe. Lucas would have had his mother. But Rebecca's instincts saved lives even after her death. Her journal entries provided crucial evidence. Her suspicions, documented in her own words, helped convince the jury that Kyle was a predator who'd been planning and executing abuse for years. The drawing Lucas made in class saved Lily's life. If Mrs. Patterson hadn't paid attention, if she hadn't called me, if I hadn't believed him, Lily might still be in that room, or dead. Kyle's online communications suggested he was planning to eventually dispose of her when she got too old or too difficult. 7-year-old Lucas, traumatized and scared, drew the truth because he couldn't speak it, and his teacher saw what adults had missed. To everyone watching this, listening to this story, pay attention to children's drawings. They tell stories kids can't verbalize. Dark themes, hidden spaces, chains, locked doors. These aren't normal childhood fears, they're evidence. Trust your instincts the way Rebecca trusted hers. Document everything. Write it down. Save it, because if something happens to you, that documentation might save someone else. And if a child in your life shows signs of trauma, investigate. Don't accept surface explanations. Don't trust that adults are handling things appropriately. Sometimes the adults are the danger. Lucas's drawing was done in crayon on construction paper. Simple, childlike, but it exposed a predator who'd murdered my daughter and was torturing another child in a hidden room. Have you ever seen something in a child's behavior or artwork that made you concerned? Did you act on it? Share your experience in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, if you work with children or care about protecting them, subscribe. These stories matter. They teach us to look closer, to question, to believe children when they try to tell us something's wrong. Lucas is safe now. Lily is healing. Rebecca got justice. And Kyle will die in prison, which is exactly what he deserves. The drawing was done in crayon, but it was the most powerful piece of evidence we had.